Welcome to the SBCA podcast, Component Connection, where we explore the people, ideas, trends, and innovations shaping the structural framing industry. Regardless of how you touch this industry, we're glad you're here. Enjoy the episode.
Hello, I'm Sean Shields, Director of Strategic Partnerships for SBCA, and I'll be your host for this episode of Component Connection. I'm joined by Monika Shripka, Senior Director of Business Development and Marketing for the National Council of Structural Engineers Association, or NCSEA. In this episode, we're going to explore the structural engineering profession a bit and get some insight into how engineers and component manufacturers can connect. Monika, welcome to the podcast.
I am so excited and honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
Ooh, honored. I like that. All right, so first off, I'm really glad to finally have you on an episode. We've known each other for quite a long time now, and I'm just excited you said yes to being part of this. As I mentioned, you also have a really impressive title. I also failed to mention that you're also a licensed professional engineer. Why don't we start by having you share briefly how you became an engineer, got into the profession, and then how you joined NCSEA?
Sure. Even as a high school age kid, I knew I wanted to do something with buildings and design. I knew, anytime we drove to a volleyball tournament or went on a road trip, I'd always tell my mom or my dad, let's go through downtown. I want to see all the tall buildings. And I was always really good at math and science. So when I got to college, I decided to pursue civil structural engineering at Washington University and loved it. And then when I graduated, I practiced as a structural engineer for a few years. I loved that as well, but I decided to move into more technical marketing roles to get more interaction, people interaction, things like that. First, I went into the association world in the structural steel industry, and then went into some more strategic marketing roles for a commercial architecture product line, and then actually an elite school, which was a little bit outside the industry. Then about 5 years ago, I came back to my roots and I joined NCSEA. And to be honest, it is kind of a combination of all my previous careers, and I really do love this job. So I feel very lucky.
Well, they're lucky to have you. As you think about NCSEA's membership, what would you say are some of the most pressing issues facing structural engineers today? What are the things that are threatening to hamper their success, whether that's individuals or, engineering firms?
Your question is perfectly timed, Sean.
Oh,
NCSEA just completed a robust round of research in the profession as part of our strategic planning process. It turns out there's many pressing issues in the structural engineering profession today and diverse viewpoints on that. But we do seem to be at somewhat of an inflection point around some of the most important themes that surfaced during the research. The three most important issues facing the industry today are adoption of artificial intelligence and other technological advancements. And that includes governance issues at the firm level, training needs at the individual level, pressure and expectations on pricing and business models. Kind of includes all of those different topics within that theme of adoption of artificial intelligence. The second one is workforce capacity, from recruiting more students into the field of structural engineering to developing young engineers to be successful practicing structural engineers. And then also just to preparing the next generation of firm leaders for success. This is an important topic throughout the industry. The third issue is structural engineering's role in the broader architectural engineering construction environment, including the importance of early involvement, relational trust, and how digital collaboration tools can hamper and potentially help firms succeed in that regard as well. So those are kind of the three big issues we're seeing: AI adoption, workforce capacity from young engineer all the way into next generation firm leaders, and then this importance of the structural engineers' seat at the table in the broader AEC environment.
I want to revisit, Monika, real quick, that first one, the adoption of AI, because that's certainly something that the component manufacturing industry, and I think most industries in general right now are trying to figure out how do we use this potentially very powerful tool in a way to make ourselves competitive, cost efficient. And I think there's some real fear there that those who don't figure out how to harness it now will be left behind. I'm curious, from a structural engineer's perspective, can you talk a little bit more about, at least from your perspective, maybe what is it about AI that offers either great promise or great disruption for this industry?
Sure. Yes, there is certainly great promise. I mean, structural engineers have adopted new technologies and it's changed the way the practice occurs time and time again. If you think about it, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, whatever, people were drawing things out on pen and paper. The advancement of CAD really was a game changer. And then more recently, the advancement of building information modeling has been kind of a game changer as well in the industry. AI feels a little different. It doesn't seem to be like that normal game changer type of process, but so different can be scary, but there's definitely opportunity there. And most structural engineering firms see that tension between the fear and the opportunity. I would say the opportunity is big in terms of making structural engineers more efficient, doing a job that feels repetitive in a way, using AI to do that job can really open the engineer up to do more deep level engineering thinking. So, there's lots of examples of that, whether it's report writing or checking drawings, checking shop drawings, kind of doing some of those tasks that are very repetitive can really open, with AI and other technological tools, can really open up structural engineers to spend their time on the challenges that really require engineering mindset. So that's a big opportunity. I think the fear and the risk is, especially for the younger engineer generations, some of those repetitive tasks that build your engineering judgment and almost are used as training ground for any new engineer, doing some of that repetitive calculation work and things like that can really build your engineering judgment and intuition so that you can think a little bit deeper and build off of that foundation of good engineering intuition. So that's kind of the fear is, well, if AI replaces some of that easy work, or not easy work, repetitive work, how are the next generations of engineers going to really build that intuition? That's one thing that kind of came out strong.
I love that. I mean, that's a perfect encapsulation of, I think, what many people are excited and fearful for. So it's good to hear that, engineers are no different than a lot of the other trades or professions sort of in the construction space. We're all in the same pot together when it comes to AI and AI adoption and some of the things that will have to shift if we really do embrace that tool. Okay, so I'm interested, Monica, then, NCSEA as an organization, you guys are very similar to SPCA, both in terms of, your staff size, the scope of your membership. I like to think of us as kindred spirits. I think we've talked about that before. Given the issues you just outlined, those top three, what would you say are some of the primary things that NCSEA is focused on to provide value to its structural engineering members?
So now I actually have to admit the timing on this question is a little more interesting because we've completed this round of research for strategic planning. We're in the midst of finalizing our strategic plan and the implementation that follows that will really set the course for the next 5 years of NCSEA initiatives and focus. So I can't share any of those details yet, but what I can say is that we really have already put some deep effort and focus into this AI initiative, the topic of AI and how that's transforming the industry. NCSEA has really put some focus into that, into helping support practicing structural engineers adopt those technologies and do it in a way that kind of safeguards some of the risks and concerns out there. We have several strong programs in place to help that structural engineering pipeline. One example of that is the NCSEA Foundation has a diversity in structural engineering college scholarship program. So hopefully we are going to be bringing more and diverse perspectives into the structural engineering pipeline. That can help for sure. And then also our events and education program at NCSC is one of our really core offerings to the profession and really does support structural engineers throughout their professional development, from young engineers to firm leaders. Our annual conference, the NCSEA Structural Engineering Summit, which I must give a shout out to SBCA for being an exhibitor this past year and also in 2026. That conference is considered best in class, and it is growing in popularity every year. We also have a robust and regular lineup of webinars on so many different technical and also non-technical topics that really help structural engineers advance their knowledge and kind of at different career points too. You know, we have things that can help a young engineer just out of college. We have webinars that can help a mid-level, project manager level structural engineer as well, and everything in between. We've also had a marketing campaign going on for the past couple of years. It's called the We See campaign, and the C stands for Structural Engineering Excellence. And this campaign has aimed to promote the expertise and the incredible value that structural engineers bring to the table when partnering with architects, building owners, contractors, and even subcontractors to create buildings and infrastructure that stand the test of time. So yes, while we don't have, the new strategic plan laid out already, we actually can proudly say that we've been working on some of these efforts all along, and really with the focus of helping our structural engineer members succeed in the profession.
Excellent. So Monica, here's the $1 million question. This will be my last sort of question for you, for this episode at least. Certainly the structural engineering profession, as you outlined, has its challenges, that are before it, not unlike what, again, many of the others in our industry are facing. Certainly within that space, we have this perspective that as the providers of structural framing, and as an industry that interacts a lot with structural engineers, we can provide a lot more value than we probably are at the moment. I'm just curious, from your perspective, both as an engineer and as someone who, again, is doing all of this within the NCSEA structure, what advice would you have, or what guidance do you have maybe to the manufacturer, so a supplier, and how they can come alongside a professional engineer and help them, or at least be a productive and more valuable partner to them?
Yeah, sure. It's a great question. Structural engineers are often seen as these silent superheroes of building and design. An architect comes with some wild idea, and the silent superhero structural engineer actually figures out a way to make that vision come to reality. However, they can't do that alone. Structural engineering firms are composed of just a lot of different subject matter experts within the firms themselves, and the breadth of knowledge is wide and deep in some regard. However, it is not all encompassing. They can't know everything. So often structural engineers look to partner with subconsultants and subcontractors, such as your members, such as SBCA members and structural building component manufacturers, to bring additional expertise and know-how to get the job done. Structural engineers really want and need to meet with these trusted partners and build those relationships. Explore how a good subcontractor's knowledge base can often extend the positive impact and value that a structural engineer brings to a project. The advice I'd give, with that in mind, the advice I'd give to a structural building component manufacturer is very tangible and specific. Actively engage with your structural engineers. Yes, of course, you're going to do that in a project. You'll do that naturally, trying to solve problems, figure out, how to do things the best way, most economically, et cetera. But try to extend that beyond a project basis to really build trust and build relationships. For example, you could get involved with your state level engineering association and attend some of their networking events. SBCA is already engaging in this type of effort at the national level through NCSCA and Structure Magazine, and I really applaud that initiative. And I think that your members can try to find ways to do that and make those connections at a project-based and local level so that when your expertise is needed, the structural engineer knows who to call. When it comes down to it, the structural engineering profession, like any other, is based on relationships and trust. Technical expertise and professional credentials are, of course, important and critical, but you can really amplify your success with trusted partners that you know you can rely on to help you get the job done.
Mm-hmm. Monica, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today and sharing those great perspectives.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Well, and thank you to everyone else for listening to this episode of SBCA's podcast, Component Connection. If you've enjoyed this episode and found it valuable, please like it, share it with others. Stay up to date and in the know by subscribing to Component Connection on whatever platform you use most.
Thanks for listening to Component Connection, brought to you by SBCA. If there's a topic you'd like us to explore in a future episode, email us at podcast@sbcacomponents.com.